For our edges, we're going to go back into our dresser group. So we're done with our shadow. We can see it looks great. Even if we put like a, like a dark maroon, there we go, something like that. It works for all of these different colors. So shadow is done. Background is done. I'm just going to go back into my dresser. And again, I can make a new layer in here, and I can choose any color that I want and paint it over top of there. And because this is defined by this dresser layer mask, it's only going to show up there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the brush tool, a combination between the brush tool and the clone stamp tool, to actually get rid of some of this dirt. I can zoom in here and hit B for the brush tool. There we go. I'm going to hold Alt or Option to sample this color here, and I'm just going to simply paint right over top of some of these areas that are just a little bit dark and a little bit dirty. And again, this is just with the brush tool. And the reason this works is because, check that out, just painted right in there. The reason this works is this is only visible where the dresser itself is visible. And I'm able to use the brush tool because I'm just painting in a relatively small area, and I'm actually grabbing the colors from the object itself. There we are. So like this looks a little bit dirty here. Let's just sample that lighter color and paint right outside there. And I'm doing this based on the specifications that Ross gave me for this image. He wanted it cut out. He wanted to be able to change the background at any time. He wanted to make sure that there was a natural looking shadow. All of these things we're keeping in mind. And I'm just making sure that we have the best possible workflow for all of these conditions. There we are. Just lighten up that area a little bit. Anywhere it just kind of like looks a little dirty. There we are. You can see around this. The leg there needs to be a little bit cleaner. You can most definitely use a clone stamp tool here if you want. I just find the brush tool is a little bit easier. There we go. Let's turn that off and on. Let's zoom out a little bit more so you can see just the edge there. How it goes from looking a little bit dirty to just nice and clean. There we are. And then anywhere around the edges that we see that. Because it's cut out and this layer is clipped, I don't have to worry about it showing up outside of the actual object itself. It's only going to show up there. All right, you can even do things like little cleanup things like this with the brush tool. Again, I'm just using a very small brush and I'm sampling the colors from inside of the image. So it's a great way to paint detail and clean things up. I know it's tempting to only want to use, complicated tools like the clone stamp tool, healing brush tool, and things like that. But oftentimes the brush tool actually makes the job easier. Just cleaning up a little, dark patch right there. There we go. So you can see I cleaned that line up there too. Just that it was like that dark patch there. And even this we can clean up. This I want to use the clone stamp tool though, because we have a good bit of texture and an edge. So I'm going to hit Alt or Option to sample there. And we'll just paint that right in. There we go. That looks great. And even up here, I'm going to use my brush tool at a really low flow and just paint it over there just to lighten that corner up just a little bit. See? It's a tiny bit of lightening. And it's such a low flow, like there's not a whole lot of, there's not a whole lot of paint coming out of the brush. that it doesn't destroy the texture. It just kind of like lightens up and softens some of these areas up a little bit. You can most definitely use a levels adjustment layer here if you needed to preserve all the texture. There's many different ways you can do this. There we go. Okay, well that looks great. Let's just turn this layer off and on. We can see we just took care of a lot of like little dirty areas around the edges, and I also just made some like clean changes in general, just like the corners and things like that. Well, there we have it. Let's go ahead and crop our image. Now, when we crop, I want to be sure that I don't include any of the shadow. So let's go ahead. I'm going to turn my background to 243. We're going to create a adjustment layer. I'm going to go to threshold and then click and drag this to the right, just like go almost all the way. There we go. And the reason I'm doing this is because now I see the boundary of all my objects, including the shadow. Okay, so a threshold just makes everything that's to the left of a certain area black, and everything that's to the right, it turns it to white. There we go. So it gives me a real clear idea of where my shadow is. So now I can hit C for my crop tool, and I can crop in my image, and I can be 100% sure that I'm not going to cut off my shadow. Because if you did, let's say you cut your shadow off like this, just a little bit, like if the background was pure white and you tried to put it on a white web page, you would see that cut off edge there. So you want to be sure to not include that when you crop. And then cropping in Photoshop, just be sure this where it says delete crop pixels, make sure that's unchecked, because you want to be able to get back your crop at any time if you need to. Again, everything we do at Flurn is non-destructive. We're not destroying any pixels here. We can get back to the original images at any time. So let's hit that little checkbox up at the top there. There we are. We cropped our image in. Let's turn our threshold, which is delete the threshold layer. We don't need it. All right, I'm going to hit F for full screen. Let's click on our background. I'm going to make that pure white. Let's go to select custom color. We'll make it pure white. There we go. So this is Ross's 243 that he likes, which is great for print. We also have our background 255. So if I hit F for full screen, check that out. You can see if this was on a web page, like if I click on the background, we can see light gray. So this is where the image is, but making a pure white background, we have a beautiful bleed. And of course we have colors like our blue background, which would really look good for a header or a catalog. You can put text and type there and everything like that. So at this point, we are completely done. And at this point, we're basically done. So let's go ahead and save it out. We're gonna hit Shift-Command-S, that's our save as. There we go, we're gonna save it. I created a PSD folder here. So it's gonna be dresseronwhite.psd. We're gonna include layers as well as embed our Adobe RGB 1998 color profile. Super important there. Let's hit save. There we go. Save over the one I made. And then if you want to export this out, I recommend going to File, down to Export, and then Save for Web. And then here you can export out a JPEG. So you could say it's a JPEG. You can choose your size. So our width, we're going to have 2000 pixels as our width. There we go. And it's going to be quality 70, which is perfect for the web. Convert to sRGB is going to make sure it looks great on the internet. And now I'm going to click on this preview icon, and it's going to open this up in my web browser, and I can see how this image is actually going to look on the web. Well, there we have it. We finished up our first image from compositing, cutting the image out of its background, adding a shadow, and our retouching. Thank you so much. We'll see you in the next section. Bye, everyone.